In the cold vastness of space, where even the most advanced civilizations fear to tread, humanity has earned a reputation that defies logic. While other species build faster ships, stronger weapons, and more sophisticated technology, humans possess something that cannot be manufactured or programmed: the stubborn refusal to abandon the helpless. When the galaxy's greatest empires encounter a derelict vessel drifting in the void, they calculate the risks, analyze the potential profits, and more often than not, simply pass by. But when a human finds something broken, something abandoned, something that others have written off as hopeless, that's when the real story begins. What happens when human compassion meets alien desperation in the depths of space? What occurs when a simple act of kindness toward a dying creature sets in motion events that will reshape the understanding of what it truly means to be alive? Some say humans are reckless. Others call them naive. But perhaps, in a universe that has forgotten the value of a single life, humanity's greatest strength lies not in their technology or their weapons, but in their inability to walk away from those who need help. This is the story of how one human mechanic's decision to rescue a paralyzed alien changed everything. Not just for them, but for the entire galaxy. Marcus Chen had been drifting through the outer rim for 3 standard months when his sensors picked up the massive energy signature. His cargo hauler, the Steady Hand, was designed for reliability rather than speed, and the long journey from the mining colonies of Kepler 442b had given him plenty of time to think about his dwindling credits and uncertain future. The signature appeared on his display like a ghost, massive, ancient, and completely unexpected in this remote section of space. Marcus frowned at the readings, running them through his ship's database twice before accepting what his instruments were telling him. Whatever lay ahead was enormous, easily 10 times the size of his own vessel, and it was running on minimal power. Computer, analysis of the contact, Marcus said, settling back in his pilot's chair. Unknown vessel detected. Length approximately 800 meters. Energy output minimal. Configuration does not match any known human, Zenthari, or Corvin designs. Estimated age, over 2,000 years. Marcus whistled low. 2,000 years was ancient, even by galactic standards. Most civilizations barely lasted that long, let alone their ships. He adjusted his heading, curiosity overriding his usual caution. Whatever it was, it might be worth investigating. Salvage rights alone could set him up for years. As the Steady Hand drew closer, Marcus could make out the vessel's details through his viewports. It was beautiful in the way that only truly alien architecture could be, flowing lines that seemed to follow no human understanding of engineering, surfaces that caught and reflected light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The whole material appeared to be some kind of crystalline metal that shifted colors as his ship's lights played across it. Scanning for life signs, Marcus muttered, though he didn't expect to find any. Ships this old were typically nothing more than elaborate tombs, if they contained anything at all. His breath caught when the scanner chirped positive. "One life form detected," the computer announced in its maddeningly calm voice. "Location: central section of the vessel. Vital signs present but weak. Quote. Deputy Signs has been awakened by many others." Marcus stared at the readout for a long moment. Someone or something had been alone on that ship for who knew how long, possibly centuries. The ethical implications hit him immediately. He couldn't just leave a living being to die, even if it meant risking his own safety. "Scan for docking ports," he ordered. "Compatible docking interface located on the port side of the vessel. Warning: atmospheric readings from the target ship indicate breathable air for human physiology, but energy levels suggest life support systems are failing." Marcus began the delicate process of maneuvering his ship toward the alien vessel's docking port. The Steady Hand wasn't designed for precision work, but years of experience had taught him how to coax cooperation from his stubborn ship. The docking procedure took nearly an hour, with several tense moments when power fluctuations in the alien vessel nearly broke the magnetic seal. When the connection finally stabilized, Marcus ran through his pre-boarding checklist. He strapped on his emergency oxygen supply, checked his multi-tool, and grabbed his portable scanner. The weight of his sidearm on his hip was reassuring. Not that it would likely be much use against alien technology, but old habits died hard. The airlock between the two ships hissed open, and Marcus stepped into another world. The interior of the alien vessel was unlike anything in his experience. The corridors were wider than human standard, with gentle curves that seemed to flow naturally from floor to ceiling. Bioluminescent panels provided soft blue-green lighting that pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. The air carried a faint scent of ozone and something organic he couldn't identify. Marcus followed his scanner's guidance through the winding passages, noting the strange beauty of the ship's design. Everything seemed grown rather than built, as if the entire vessel was a single massive organism. Doors opened at his approach without sound, revealing chambers filled with equipment he couldn't begin to understand. The life sign grew stronger as he moved deeper into the ship, and soon he could hear it, a faint, rhythmic breathing that echoed through the corridors. The sound led him to what appeared to be the ship's central chamber, a vast space dominated by a pool of pale, luminous liquid. In the center of the pool, suspended by some kind of support system, was the most beautiful and terrifying creature Marcus had ever seen. It was approximately the size of a large wolf, but where a wolf's form was familiar, this being was utterly alien. Its body was covered in what appeared to be fur, but the strands shifted color constantly, creating patterns that seemed to have meaning. 6 limbs extended from its elongated torso, each ending in hands that combined the dexterity of human fingers with the power of predatory claws. Its head was large and angular with features that suggested both intelligence and grace. But what struck Marcus most forcefully were its eyes. They were enormous, taking up much of the creature's face, and they held an unmistakable intelligence. When those eyes focused on him, Marcus felt a moment of vertigo, as if he was looking into depths that contained entire universes. The creature was obviously paralyzed. Its body hung limp in the support cradle, and Marcus could see the artificial systems that were keeping it alive. Tubes delivered nutrients and removed waste, while other devices monitored its vital signs with technology far beyond human understanding. As Marcus approached, the creature's eyes tracked his movement. There was no fear in that gaze, only a profound weariness and something that might have been hope. "Hello!" Marcus said softly, knowing the words probably meant nothing to the alien, but feeling the need to announce his presence properly. "I'm here to help." The creature's response was immediate and shocking. A voice spoke directly into Marcus's mind, bypassing his ears entirely. "Trust Teddy." The words came with images and emotions, creating a communication more complete than any language he had ever experienced. "You are human. I know this species. You are the ones who do not abandon." Marcus stumbled backward, his hand instinctively going to his sidearm before his rational mind caught up. The voice in his head was gentle, tinged with an ancient sadness that made his chest tight. "You can read my mind?" he managed to ask aloud. "Not read. Share. Your species' minds are accessible to mine when both parties are willing. I have been waiting for someone like you for a very long time. How long have you been here?" Images flowed into Marcus's mind, star charts showing the movement of galaxies over millennia, the slow decay of civilizations, the passage of centuries marked by the gradual failure of ship's systems. "Teddy, 732 of your years. I have been conscious for all of it." The weight of that revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. 7 centuries of paralysis, alone in the void, conscious and aware of every passing moment. It was a horror beyond his imagination. "My name is Kethvar. I was the navigator of this vessel when the attack came. My people, the Vorthak, were explorers. We traveled between stars to catalog life, to preserve knowledge. We were not warriors." More images flashed through Marcus's mind. A species of graceful, intelligent beings, who moved between worlds as easily as humans moved between cities. Ships like living things carrying crews dedicated to understanding the universe. And then fire and violence as something ancient and malevolent swept through their space, destroying everything in its path. The Devourers came without warning. They consumed worlds, not just life, but the very essence of existence itself. My people tried to fight, but how do you battle something that feeds on reality itself? This ship was damaged in the evacuation of our homeworld. The navigation systems failed, and we drifted into this void. One by one, my crew died. The ship's life support began to fail. Kethvar's mental voice carried centuries of grief. I chose to enter the survival pods, hoping that someday rescue would come. But the paralysis was a side effect of the extended suspension. My body ceased to function, but my mind remained active. I have watched stars be born and die through the ship's sensors. I have listened to radio signals from 100 species as they rose and fell. And I waited. Why didn't you send a distress signal? Marcus asked. The ship's communication systems failed decades ago. And truthfully, I had given up hope that anyone would come. My people are gone. Their worlds are ash. I am the last of the Vorthak, and I have been ready to join my ancestors for a very long time. Marcus felt the creature's resignation like a weight in his chest, but beneath it, he sensed something else, a flicker of curiosity about his presence. But you came, a human. Your species is young, barely crawled from its homeworld, yet you travel the void with the same fearlessness as the ancient races. Why did you risk boarding this ship? Because someone needed help, Marcus said simply. The silence that followed was profound. In his mind, Marcus felt Kethvar's amazement ripple outward like waves. Because someone needed help, the alien repeated. Such a simple answer. Such a human answer. Can you be moved? Marcus asked, his mind already working through the logistics. My ship has medical facilities. Basic ones, but maybe there's something I can do. The life support systems that sustain me are integrated with the ship. To remove me would mean death within hours. Marcus studied the complex array of machinery surrounding Kethvar. Even with his experience as a mechanic, much of it was beyond his understanding. But not all of it. What if I could get the ship moving? He asked. Tow it to a station where proper medical facilities exist? This vessel massed several million tons when fully operational. Your cargo hauler could not possibly generate sufficient power. Maybe not on its own, Marcus admitted, but the ship still has some power, right? If I could get the main engines working, even at minimal capacity, I might be able to guide it somewhere with my ship providing navigation and course corrections. For the first time in their conversation, Marcus felt something like excitement from Kethvar. You would do this? Spend your resources, risk your life for a creature you have only just met? Yeah, Marcus said, already moving toward what looked like a control panel. That's what humans do. As he began examining the alien technology, trying to understand its principles, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was more significant than it appeared. Kethvar had been waiting for 7 centuries, and Marcus had found him. In a galaxy where the odds of such an encounter were literally astronomical, something had brought them together. The work ahead would be difficult, possibly impossible. The technology was alien, the ship was ancient, and his own resources were limited. But as Marcus began the painstaking process of learning how to operate Vorthak systems, he felt a familiar satisfaction. This was what he did best, fix things that others had written off as broken beyond repair. Behind him, suspended in his pool of life-giving fluid, Kethvar watched with eyes that held the weight of centuries. For the first time in longer than many species had existed, the last of the Vorthak allowed himself to hope. The next 18 hours blurred together as Marcus threw himself into understanding Vorthak technology with an intensity that surprised even him. Working by the soft bioluminescent glow of the ship's lighting, he mapped power conduits, traced data flows, and slowly began to grasp the elegant logic behind the alien systems. Everything on the ship was integrated in ways that human engineering couldn't match. The life support wasn't just a separate system, it was woven into the ship's structure, like blood vessels through a body. The engines didn't simply push the vessel forward. They harmonized with gravitational fields in ways that seemed to violate physics until Marcus realized the Vorthak had been manipulating space-time itself. Kethvar proved to be an invaluable guide, his mental voice patient as he explained concepts that stretched Marcus's understanding to its limits. "Your species thinks in terms of mechanical force," Kethvar observed as Marcus struggled with a particularly complex power distribution node. "Push against the universe and make it yield. My people learn to work with the natural flows of reality. We guide rather than force." "That's a beautiful philosophy," Marcus said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "But right now, I need to understand how to make this thing work." Marcus stepped back and looked at the control panel as a whole rather than focusing on individual components. Gradually, he began to see it. The way energy flowed through the ship wasn't random, but followed patterns that reminded him of living things. Neural networks, circulatory systems, even plant growth. "It's biological," he breathed. "Not biological as you understand it. The ship is a hybrid of technology and controlled evolution. We grew our vessels as much as we built them." Armed with this new understanding, Marcus's progress accelerated. He learned to read the ship's status displays, understanding that the slowly pulsing lights weren't just indicators, but actual representations of the vessel's health. The ship was alive, in a sense, and it was dying. The main engines were the most complex system Marcus had ever encountered. Instead of simple reaction drives or even fusion rockets, the Vorthak had created something that bent space around the ship, allowing it to slide through folded reality like a ship sailing with favorable winds. The math behind it was incomprehensible, but the principle was elegant. "We called them harmony drives," Kethvar explained as Marcus studied the massive crystalline structures that formed the engine core. "They sing with the fundamental frequencies of space-time itself. When properly attuned, the universe becomes cooperative rather than resistant." "Can you still operate them?" Marcus asked. "The drives respond to thought as much as to mechanical control. That is why navigators like myself were necessary. But the interface requires physical contact with the neural conduits, and Marcus understood. Kethvar's paralysis meant he couldn't make the necessary connections to control the ship's systems manually. "What if I could act as an intermediary?" Marcus suggested. "You could guide me through the mental link, and I could make the physical adjustments." The silence from Kethvar stretched for several minutes. When the alien finally responded, his mental voice carried undertones of fear. The neural interface was designed for Vorthak physiology. Connecting a human mind directly to the ship's systems could cause permanent damage to your consciousness. "I have already caused you to risk so much." "Let me worry about that," Marcus interrupted. "What's the worst that could happen? Death, madness, complete personality dissolution." "Okay, those are pretty bad," Marcus admitted. "But what happens if we don't try? I die slowly as the ship's systems fail completely. You return to your vessel and continue your journey." "That's not happening." Marcus's voice was firm. "There has to be a way to make this work safely." For the next several hours, Marcus and Kethvar worked together to modify the neural interface. The Vorthak's knowledge of his own ship's systems was encyclopedic, and Marcus's practical engineering experience proved invaluable in adapting alien technology for human use. The solution they developed was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than connecting Marcus directly to the ship's consciousness, they created a buffer system using parts cannibalized from Marcus's own ship. The Steady Hands computers would serve as a translation layer, converting Kethvar's mental commands into signals the ship could understand while protecting Marcus from direct neural feedback. "This is either going to work brilliantly or kill us both," Marcus said as he made the final connections. "Those are acceptable odds." Kethvar replied with what Marcus was beginning to recognize as alien humor. The first test was gentle, just a basic systems check to ensure the interface was functioning properly. Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation as the connection activated, followed by an overwhelming sense of being connected to something vast and ancient. Through the link, he could feel the ship's condition like his own heartbeat, could sense the slow decay of systems that had once been magnificent. "Can you feel the engines?" Kethvar asked. Marcus extended his awareness, following the pathways Kethvar showed him through their shared mental link. Gradually, he became aware of the harmony drives as massive, sleeping giants deep in the ship's core. They weren't dead, but they were barely functioning, like a heart beating too slowly to sustain life. "We need to reharmonize the frequency crystals," Kethvar explained. "Each one must be tuned to resonate with local space-time conditions." Working together, they began the delicate process of awakening the ancient engines. Marcus provided the physical interface while Kethvar guided him through procedures that had been old when human civilization was still in its infancy. It was the strangest collaboration of Marcus's life, his hands moving with knowledge that wasn't his own, making adjustments to technology he couldn't fully understand. The first crystal came online with a sound like distant music, a harmonic that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. One by one, the other crystals followed, each adding its voice to a growing symphony of power. "Magnificent," Kethvar whispered in Marcus's mind. "I had forgotten how beautiful they sound." With the engines slowly coming to life, Marcus turned his attention to the navigation systems. This proved to be an even greater challenge than the drives themselves. The Vorthak navigated not just through three-dimensional space, but through the hidden dimensions that their harmony drives manipulated. Their star charts were works of art that showed the universe as a vast web of interconnected energies. "How do I plot a course to the nearest inhabited system?" Marcus asked. "First, you must understand where we are," Kethvar replied. What followed was Marcus's first true education in Vorthak cosmology. Through their mental link, Kethvar showed him how the universe really worked, not just as a collection of stars and planets, but as a living system where every massive object created ripples in the fabric of reality. The Vorthak had learned to read these ripples like humans read maps, using them to navigate with precision across vast distances. "We are here," Kethvar indicated, and Marcus suddenly understood their position not just in space, but in the larger patterns of galactic structure. They were in what humans called the Outer Rim, but to the Vorthak they were in a region of space where the harmonic frequencies were particularly favorable for their technology. "The nearest inhabited system with medical facilities that might help us is the Zenthari station at Sigma Draconis, but it is not a simple journey. We must follow the harmony paths, riding the gravitational currents like a river." Marcus studied the route Kethvar showed him, trying to understand the three-dimensional course through space that would take advantage of the natural forces the harmony drives could tap. It was like learning to sail all over again, but with stellar winds and currents that operated according to physics he was only beginning to grasp. The actual process of getting the ship moving was anticlimactic after all their preparation. Marcus simply thought the commands Kethvar gave him, and the ancient vessel responded like a living thing. The harmony drives sang louder, and Marcus felt a strange sensation as space itself seemed to flow around them. Through the ship's sensors, he watched the stars begin to move. "We are underway," Kethvar announced, and Marcus could feel the alien's satisfaction and relief. "At current velocity, we will reach Sigma Draconis in 6 standard days." 6 days gave them time to work on other problems. Most urgently, Kethvar's life support systems were failing faster than anticipated. The ship's self-repair capabilities had been gradually breaking down over the centuries, and several critical components were near collapse. Marcus threw himself into learning Vorthak biotechnology with the same intensity he had applied to their engines. The medical systems were marvels of biological engineering, machines that weren't quite machines, devices that seemed to blur the line between technology and life itself. My people understood that the boundary between living and non-living was artificial, Kethvar explained as Marcus studied the complex apparatus keeping the alien alive. These devices don't just sustain biological functions, they enhance them, adapt them, even improve them. Could they help with your paralysis? Marcus asked. Perhaps with proper calibration. But I am the last who knows how to adjust them, and I cannot reach the controls. Once again, Marcus found himself adapting alien technology for human hands. It was delicate work. One mistake could kill Kethvar instantly. But under the alien's patient guidance, Marcus learned to read the subtle biological indicators that showed how the systems were functioning. What he discovered amazed him. Kethvar's paralysis wasn't just a side effect of the long suspension. It was a progressive condition that had been getting worse over the centuries. The alien's nervous system was slowly shutting down, cell by cell, as his body forgot how to function normally. But the medical systems weren't just keeping Kethvar alive. They were learning, adapting, trying to compensate for the damage. Given time and proper guidance, they might actually be able to reverse the paralysis entirely. Is such a thing possible? Kethvar asked when Marcus shared his analysis. I think so. The technology is incredible. It's like your medical systems are trying to rebuild your nervous system from the inside. They just need better guidance. Working together, they began the process of reprogramming the medical systems for active healing rather than mere maintenance. It was slow work, requiring constant adjustment and monitoring. But as the days passed, Marcus began to see subtle improvements in Kethvar's condition. Small movements in the alien's fingers, slight improvements in his vital signs. Nothing dramatic, but enough to prove the approach was working. I can feel it, Kethvar whispered on their fourth day out from the derelict's original position. Sensations I had forgotten. It is like awakening from a dream that lasted centuries. As they traveled towards Sigma Draconis, Marcus learned more about Kethvar's people and their history. The Vorthak had been one of the oldest spacefaring races in the galaxy, explorers and scholars who had mapped vast regions of space and cataloged thousands of species. They had been peaceful, curious, and utterly unprepared for the horror that eventually destroyed them. The Devourers were something from outside our reality, Kethvar explained during one of their long conversations. Beings that existed in the spaces between dimensions, feeding on the ordered energy of normal matter. When they broke through into our universe, they brought chaos itself with them. The war that followed had been less a battle than an extinction event. The Devourers consumed entire star systems, not just destroying life but unraveling the very structure of space-time itself. The Vorthak and their allies had fought desperately, but how could anyone battle an enemy that turned the laws of physics against itself? In the end, we could only run, Kethvar said sadly. Those few of us who survived scattered to the winds, hoping to preserve some remnant of our civilization. I do not know if any others escaped. Marcus found himself deeply moved by the story of the Vorthak's destruction. An entire civilization, thousands of years old, wiped out by something that shouldn't have been able to exist. The tragedy of it was almost beyond comprehension. But as he worked alongside Kethvar, Marcus began to understand something else. The alien wasn't just the last of his people. He was a living repository of knowledge that could benefit the entire galaxy. Vorthak science was centuries ahead of anything humans had achieved, and their understanding of the universe's fundamental principles could revolutionize space travel for every species. Why do you care so much about preserving my knowledge? Kethvar asked when Marcus mentioned this. Because knowledge is meant to be shared, Marcus replied. Your people spent thousands of years learning about the universe. That understanding shouldn't die with you. Such generosity of spirit. This is why my people respected humans, even when your species was young. Your people knew about humans? We encountered your species several times during your early expansion into space. You were remarkable. Most young species are either too aggressive or too timid to survive contact with older civilizations. But humans showed a unique balance of caution and courage. You helped those who needed aid. even when it cost you dearly. Marcus thought about that as they approached their destination. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy was decidedly mixed. Some species saw them as dangerous upstarts, others as useful allies. But apparently, at least one ancient race had seen something special in human nature. On their 6th day of travel, the Sigma Draconis system came into view. The Zenthari station was a massive construction, a sphere nearly 50 kilometers in diameter that served as both a trading post and a medical facility for dozens of species. As their ship approached, Marcus felt a mixture of hope and anxiety. The Zenthari were known for their advanced medical technology, but they were also notoriously expensive and sometimes difficult to deal with. Would they be willing to help an alien from an extinct species? And more importantly, could they actually do anything that Marcus and Kethvar hadn't already tried? Whatever happens, Kethvar said as they prepared to make contact with the station, I want you to know that these past few days have been the most meaningful of my life since the fall of my people. You have given me hope when I thought all hope was lost. Marcus felt a tightness in his chest at the alien's words. In trying to save Kethvar, he had found something he hadn't known he was looking for, a purpose that went beyond simple survival in the galaxy's economic margins. As the Zenthari station grew larger in their viewports, Marcus prepared for the next phase of their unlikely partnership. Whatever lay ahead, he was determined to see it through. Kethvar had waited 7 centuries for rescue. Marcus wasn't about to let him down now. The Zenthari medical station was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. As their ship approached the massive sphere, he could make out thousands of docking ports, each designed for different species vessels. The surface of the station was covered in a complex pattern of lights that pulsed and shifted in hypnotic rhythms. Unidentified vessel, this is Sigma Draconis Medical Station. State your business and species designation. Came the transmission in heavily accented Standard Galactic. Marcus activated his ship's communication system. This is the cargo hauler, steady hand. Captain Marcus Chen. Human, I'm requesting emergency medical assistance for a critically injured alien passenger. The pause that followed was longer than normal. When the Zenthar finally responded, their tone had shifted from routine boredom to sharp interest. Human vessel. You are traveling in an unregistered ship of unknown configuration. Our sensors detect significant energy signatures consistent with forbidden technologies. Explain immediately. They are suspicious, Kethvar observed through their mental link. The Zenthari have encountered Vorthak technology before, but they believe my people are extinct. Marcus chose his words carefully. I discovered a derelict vessel with a surviving crew member. The ship is of unknown origin, but the individual requires immediate medical attention. I'm willing to pay standard emergency rates. Maintain current position, the Zenthari commanded. Prepare to be boarded for inspection. The next hour was tense as Marcus and Kethvar waited for the Zenthari inspection team. Marcus used the time to review everything he knew about the species. The Zenthar were one of the galaxy's major powers, a race of tall, insectoid beings known for their advanced medical technology and their rigid adherence to regulations. They were also notorious for their greed and their tendency to confiscate anything they deemed dangerous. Do not let them take the ship, Kethvar warned. The Zenthari have been collecting Vorthok artifacts for centuries. They would claim the vessel for study and leave me to die. How do you know so much about them? Marcus asked. My people had dealings with them before the Devourers came. The Zenthari were always looking for ways to acquire our technology without paying for it. When the inspection shuttle finally arrived, Marcus was ready. He had spent the waiting time carefully hiding the most obviously advanced pieces of Vorthak technology and coaching Kethvar on how to appear as just another unknown alien species. The Zenthari boarding party consisted of 3 beings, each nearly 3 meters tall, with chitinous exoskeletons that gleamed under the ship's lights. Their compound eyes missed nothing as they moved through the ancient vessels, scanning everything with handheld devices. Fascinating architecture, the lead inspector observed in his clicking mechanical voice. Technology is clearly pre-galactic. but the energy efficiency is remarkable. What species did you say this belongs to? I didn't, Marcus replied carefully. I found the ship derelict and rescued the survivor. He's been in some kind of medical suspension for an unknown period. They followed the Zenthari to Kethvar's chamber. The alien had managed to dim the more obvious displays of advanced technology, making the medical systems look primitive rather than sophisticated. To the casual observer, he appeared to be a paralyzed alien being kept alive by basic life support. The lead Zenthari ran his scanner over Kethvar, and his compound eyes widened slightly. Interesting physiology. The neural pathways are unlike anything in our databases. How long has he been conscious? Tell them I have only recently awakened, Kethvar whispered into Marcus's mind. He's been in and out of consciousness since I found him, Marcus lied smoothly. I've been trying to keep him stable until we could reach medical facilities. The Zenthari continued their examination, taking readings and muttering among themselves in their own language. Finally, the leader turned to Marcus. We can provide medical assistance, but there will be conditions. First, the ship must remain docked at our station during treatment. Second, we require full access to all technology aboard for analysis. Third, payment must be made in advance. How much? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer would be more than he could afford. For a case this complex involving an unknown species, 50,000 credits. Marcus felt his heart sink. He had less than 3,000 credits to his name. That's impossible. I don't have that kind of money. The Zenthari's expression didn't change. Then perhaps we can arrange an alternative payment method. This vessel contains technology that would be valuable for study. We would accept ownership of the ship in lieu of monetary payment. No! Kethvar's mental voice was fierce. They seek to steal my people's legacy. They have no right. The ship belongs to him, Marcus said firmly, indicating Kethvar. I can't make that decision. A paralyzed alien with no legal standing in galactic law cannot own property. The Zenthar replied dismissively. As his rescuer, you have salvage rights. You can make the decision. Marcus felt anger building in his chest. The casual way the Zenthari dismissed Kethvar's rights, their assumption that they could simply take what they wanted, triggered every protective instinct he possessed. No deal, he said flatly. The lead Zenthari's mandibles clicked in what Marcus recognized as irritation. Then your companion will die. These are our terms. Accept them or find medical assistance elsewhere. There has to be another way, Marcus insisted. Perhaps, the Zenthari said thoughtfully. Our medical bay is currently treating a particularly difficult case. If you were willing to assist with the procedure, we might reduce our fee. What kind of procedure? A Corvin freighter captain suffered severe neural trauma in a pirate attack. Our surgeons have been unable to repair the damage because the patient's brain chemistry is too alien for our equipment to interpret properly. However, your companion appears to have remarkable neural capabilities. If he could provide guidance during the surgery, we would consider that partial payment. Marcus looked at Kethvar, whose eyes had suddenly become very alert. A neural trauma case? Kethvar asked. What are the specific symptoms? Marcus relayed the question to the Zenthari who consulted his scanner. Massive synaptic disruption, memory fragmentation, and complete loss of motor control. The patient has been in a coma for 3 standard weeks. I can help, Kethvar said immediately. Vorthak medical knowledge includes advanced neural reconstruction techniques. But I will need direct access to the patient and medical equipment. He says he might be able to help, Marcus told the Zenthari, but he'll need to be moved to your medical bay. The negotiations that followed were complex and tense. The Zenthari wanted guarantees that Kethvar could actually help their patient. Kethvar needed assurances that he would receive proper medical care regardless of the outcome. Marcus found himself acting as mediator between two species with fundamentally different approaches to medicine and law. Finally, they reached an agreement. Kethvar would be transported to the station's medical bay, where he would assist with the Corvin patient's treatment while receiving his own care. If the procedure was successful, the The Zenthari would reduce their fee to 10,000 credits. If it failed, they would still provide basic stabilization for Kethvar, but he would not receive the advanced treatment he needed. It is a risk, Kethvar acknowledged as they prepared for transport, but one worth taking. I have been useless for centuries. Perhaps I can help this injured being and prove my value to the universe once more. The transfer to the Zenthari Medical Bay was a carefully orchestrated procedure. Kethvar's life support systems had to be maintained throughout the move, requiring the construction of a portable version of the equipment that kept him alive. Marcus worked alongside Zenthari technicians, his knowledge of Vorthak technology proving invaluable in adapting the alien medical systems. Zenthari Medical Bay was an impressive facility filled with equipment designed to treat dozens of different species. The Corvin patient lay in the center of the bay, surrounded by monitoring devices and surgical equipment. She was a large reptilian being with scales that shifted color according to her emotional state, currently a dull gray that indicated unconsciousness. Severe damage, Kethvar observed after the Zenthari allowed him to scan the patient's neural pathways. But not irreparable. The synaptic disruption follows patterns I have seen before. With the right approach, much of the damage can be reversed. The actual medical procedure was unlike anything Marcus had ever witnessed. Using the mental link he had developed with Kethvar, Marcus served as an interpreter between the paralyzed alien and the Zenthari surgeons. Kethvar guided them through neural reconstruction techniques that were thousands of years old, methods for repairing brain damage that the Zenthari had never encountered. The key is not to force the neurons to reconnect, Kethvar explained as the surgeons worked. Instead, we create conditions where they want to reconnect naturally. Neural tissue is fundamentally driven to form patterns. We simply provide the correct environment for those patterns to emerge. The surgery took 14 hours. Marcus remained at the interface the entire time, translating Kethvar's instructions and monitoring the patient's responses. It was exhausting work that required absolute concentration. One mistranslated instruction could cause permanent brain damage or death. But gradually, they began to see results. The Corvin's neural pathways started showing increased activity. Her brain chemistry began to stabilize. Most dramatically, her scales began to shift from gray to a pale blue that indicated peaceful sleep rather than unconsciousness. Remarkable, the lead surgeon muttered as he reviewed the readings. The techniques are completely outside our experience, but they are clearly effective. When the Corvin finally opened her eyes 18 hours after the surgery, the medical bay erupted in restrained celebration. She was confused and disoriented, but her responses to cognitive tests showed that her memory and motor functions were returning to normal. "We did it," Kethvar whispered to Marcus. "She will recover fully." The success of the surgery transformed the Zenthari's attitude toward both Marcus and Kethvar. The medical knowledge that Kethvar had demonstrated was clearly valuable beyond measure, and the station's administrators began to see him not as a burden but as a potential asset. "Your companion's medical knowledge could revolutionize neural surgery," the chief medical officer told Marcus. "We would be interested in arranging a longer-term collaboration." But as the Zenthari began their own treatment of Kethvar's paralysis, Marcus discovered something troubling. Their approach was crude compared to the aliens' own medical systems focused on immediate results rather than long-term healing. More concerning, they seemed to view Kethvar as a source of medical knowledge to be exploited rather than a patient to be healed. "They see me as a valuable resource," Kethvar observed during one of their private conversations. "They will keep me alive to extract my knowledge, but they have no interest in truly curing me." Marcus watched the Zenthari medical team work on Kethvar over the following days, and he began to understand what the alien meant. The treatments were effective at stabilizing his condition, but they made no attempt to address the underlying causes of his paralysis. Instead, they seemed designed to keep him dependent on their medical support indefinitely. "We're leaving," Marcus announced on their 5th day at the station. "That would not be advisable," the chief medical officer replied. "Your companion's condition is still critical. Without our support, he will likely die within days." Then we'll have to risk it. The confrontation that followed revealed the true nature of the Zentharis' intentions. They had no intention of releasing Kethvar, viewing him as too valuable to lose. The aliens' knowledge could advance their medical technology by centuries, giving them a crucial advantage over their competitors. They planned to keep me as a living database, Kethvar said sadly. I should have expected this. But Marcus had learned a few things during their time on the station. He had studied Zenthari law and regulations, looking for loopholes and exceptions. What he found gave him hope. According to Galactic Medical Ethics Code 447, Marcus announced at the next meeting with the station administrators, any patient has the right to refuse treatment and leave medical care, regardless of their condition. You cannot hold him against his will. He is not competent to make such decisions, the chief medical officer protested. His condition impairs his judgment. Then, as his legal guardian under human law, I'm making the decision for him. The Zenthari claimed that Marcus had no legal standing to represent Kethvar. Marcus argued that his rescue of the alien created a legal obligation to protect his interests. Kethvar himself complicated matters by insisting that he was competent to make his own decisions despite his physical condition. The resolution came from an unexpected source. The Corvin captain whom they had helped recover made a formal statement supporting Marcus and Kethavar's position. As a ship's captain with legal standing in multiple jurisdictions, her testimony carried considerable weight. These beings saved my life and sanity, she declared in her deposition. The human showed courage and compassion in rescuing a stranger, and the Ancient One shared knowledge that could have been kept secret. They deserve our protection, not exploitation. Faced with legal challenges and negative publicity, the Zenthari finally agreed to release Kethvar, but they extracted a final price. Marcus had to sign agreements preventing him from sharing any of the medical techniques they had observed with competing medical facilities. As they prepared to leave the station, Marcus felt both relief and apprehension. They had escaped the Zenthar's exploitation, but Kethvar's condition was still precarious. The alien medical systems aboard the derelict ship were more advanced than anything the Zenthari possessed, but they were also failing after centuries of operation. Where will we go? Kethvar asked as they prepared for departure. Marcus had been thinking about that question for days. They needed a place where Kethvar could receive proper medical care without being exploited, somewhere that would respect his autonomy and his people's legacy. I know a place, Marcus said finally. It's not fancy, and it's not particularly advanced, but the people there judge others by what they do, not what they can provide. As their ship pulled away from the Zenthari station, Marcus began plotting a course for the human colony of New Geneva. It was a long journey, but for the first time since discovering the ancient ship, Marcus felt optimistic about their chances. Kethvar had survived 7 centuries of isolation and the Zenthari's attempts to exploit him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Marcus was determined to see that the last of the Vorthak found the peace and healing he deserved. The journey to New Geneva took 3 weeks, and it became the most extraordinary period of Marcus's life. Free from the pressures of the Zenthari station, he and Kethvar were able to work together to stabilize the alien's condition using the advanced medical systems aboard the Vorthak ship. But more than that, they talked. Through their mental link, Kethvar shared 7 centuries of observations about the galaxy, insights into alien species and cosmic phenomena that no human had ever heard. Marcus, in return, told Kethvar about humanity's expansion into space, their struggles and triumphs, their hopes for the future. Your species is remarkable, Kethvar observed during one of their conversations. Most races become cautious as they encounter older civilizations, learning to avoid conflict by avoiding risks. But humans seem to become more generous the more they learn about the universe. Maybe because we know how fragile everything is, Marcus replied. When you realize how easy it is for things to go wrong, you start appreciating every chance to make things go right. As they traveled, Marcus began to understand just how extensive Kethvar's knowledge was. The alien had observed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations, witnessed cosmic events that occurred once in a million years, and retained detailed memories of scientific and cultural achievements spanning millennia. "I have become a living archive," Kethvar said when Marcus commented on the breadth of his knowledge. "When my people died, I became the repository of everything they had learned. It is both a privilege and a terrible burden." Working together, they made remarkable progress in repairing Kethvar's damaged neural pathways. The aliens' own medical systems were incredibly sophisticated, but they had been running on automatic protocols for centuries. With conscious guidance from Kethvar and mechanical skills from Marcus, they were able to optimize the healing process in ways the original designers had never intended. By the time they reached New Geneva, Kethvar had regained limited movement in his extremities and was able to remain conscious for longer periods without exhaustion. New Geneva was exactly what Marcus had promised, a modest human colony that prioritized community over profit, cooperation over exploitation. The colony's medical facilities were basic compared to the Zenthari station, but they were run by people who genuinely cared about their patients. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus despite the shared surname, was the colony's chief medical officer, a woman in her 50s who had left a prestigious position on Earth to practice medicine on the frontier. When Marcus explained their situation, her response was immediate and uncompromising. "We'll help him," she said simply. "That's what we do here." The integration of Vorthak medical technology with human techniques proved to be a fascinating challenge. Chen and her team approached it with the systematic curiosity that characterized the best of human science, learning from Kethvar while respecting his autonomy and dignity. "They are unlike any species I have encountered," Kethvar observed after his first week at the New Geneva Medical Center. "They ask permission before they study my technology. They explain their procedures before implementing them. They treat me as a person, not a collection of interesting symptoms." The breakthrough came when Dr. Chen suggested combining Kethvar's advanced biological restoration techniques with human neural engineering. The approach was radical. Instead of simply trying to repair the damaged pathways in Kethvar's nervous system, they would create hybrid biological-technological interfaces that could replace the damaged areas entirely. "It's experimental, Doctor," Chen warned. "We've never tried anything like this before. There are risks." "I have been dying slowly for 7 centuries, Kethvar replied through Marcus. "A quick death while attempting to live would be preferable." The procedure took place over several months, with numerous small surgeries and adjustments as the human medical team learned to work with Vorthak biotechnology. Marcus remained involved throughout, serving as interpreter and advocate for Kethvar's needs. But the real revelation came not from the medical procedures, but from the interactions between Kethvar and the human colonists. Word of the ancient alien's presence spread through New Geneva, but instead of trying to exploit his knowledge, the colonists simply welcomed him as a member of their community. Children would visit the medical center to hear Kethvar's stories about distant stars. Engineers would consult with him about problems with the colony's infrastructure, finding that his ancient perspective often suggested innovative solutions. Artists would sit with him for hours, inspired by his descriptions of alien beauty they could barely imagine. They are curious without being invasive. Kethvar marveled. They want to learn, but they do not demand knowledge as payment for acceptance. The transformation in Kethvar was remarkable. As his physical condition improved and he found himself part of a caring community, the ancient sadness that had defined him began to fade. For the first time in centuries, he had hope for the future. 6 months after arriving at New Geneva, Kethvar took his first steps in over 700 years. The moment was witnessed by nearly the entire colony gathered in the medical center's main hall. Kethvar's movements were careful and deliberate, supported by the hybrid biological-technological systems that Dr. Chen's team had developed. But he was walking under his own power, his 6 limbs coordinating in the graceful patterns that were characteristic of his species. The colonists' cheers were so loud they could be heard throughout the settlement. I had forgotten what it felt like to move freely, Kethvar said to Marcus afterward, to feel the ground beneath my feet, to balance my own weight. You have given me back my life. But even as they celebrated Kethvar's recovery, Marcus was aware that their time together was changing. The alien was no longer dependent on his care, no longer a patient requiring rescue. He was becoming something new, a bridge between human and alien understanding, a teacher and guide who could help humanity navigate the complex galactic community. The transformation became complete when Kethvar made an announcement that surprised everyone, including Marcus. I wish to become a citizen of New Geneva, he declared during a colony council meeting. If the community will accept me, I would like to make this place my home. The vote was unanimous in favor. What followed was the most unique naturalization ceremony in human history. Kethvar, the last surviving member of an ancient alien species, officially became a human colonial citizen. The ceremony was conducted both in English and in the harmonic tones of the Vorthak language, with Kethvar teaching the colonists to pronounce the ancient words. Today I am reborn, he said in his acceptance speech, delivered both mentally and through the colony's translation systems. I am no longer merely the last of the Vorthak. I am also the first Vorthak human. I carry the legacy of my people, but I choose to build my future with yours. As Kethvar settled into life as a New Geneva colonist, Marcus found himself facing a choice. His cargo hauler was still docked at the colony, and his old life of running freight between distant worlds was waiting for him. But the past year had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. You don't have to leave, Dr. Chen told him over dinner one evening. The colony could use someone with your skills. Kethvar has been teaching us about Vorthak technology, but we need engineers who can apply that knowledge practically. Marcus looked across the settlement's main square, where Kethvar was visible through the windows of the community center, teaching a group of fascinated children about alien constellations. The sight filled him with a warmth he had never experienced in his solitary travels. I'll stay, he decided. The announcement surprised no one. Marcus and Kethvar had become inseparable partners over the months of their collaboration, but it marked the beginning of a new phase in both their lives. Together, they began working on projects that combined human engineering with Vorthak knowledge. They developed new medical technologies that could treat species throughout the galaxy. They created improved spacecraft designs that were more efficient and environmentally sustainable. They established educational programs that taught human children about alien cultures and perspectives. We make a good team, Kethvar observed as they worked late one evening on plans for a new research facility. Your practical skills complement my theoretical knowledge perfectly. It's more than that, Marcus replied. We trust each other completely. That's rare between any two individuals, but between two different species. Perhaps that is the real lesson of our partnership, Kethvar suggested. Trust is not limited by the boundaries of species or culture. It grows from shared experience and mutual respect. As their first year as New Geneva citizens drew to a close, Marcus reflected on how much their lives had changed. Kethvar was no longer a dying alien in need of rescue. He had become a respected member of the community, a teacher and innovator who was helping to shape the colony's future. Marcus was no longer a lonely cargo hauler drifting between worlds. He had found a home and a purpose that fulfilled him in ways he had never imagined. But the most remarkable change was in the colony itself. The presence of Kethvar and the knowledge he brought had attracted attention from throughout human space. New Geneva was becoming a center for human-alien cooperation, a place where different species could work together as equals rather than competitors. You asked me once why I was willing to risk everything to help a stranger, Marcus said to Kethvar one evening as they watched the sunset over the colony's growing skyline. I think I understand now. It's because every act of kindness creates possibilities that never existed before. And now we have created something neither of our species could have achieved alone, Kethvar replied. a future where the wisdom of the past guides the hope of tomorrow. As they prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, Marcus knew that their partnership had become something larger than either of them had expected. They were no longer just a human and an alien who had found each other in the void. They were the beginning of something new, a demonstration that the galaxy's future lay not in competition between species, but in cooperation between individuals who chose to trust each other. The stars above New Geneva shone with the same light that had guided Kethavar's people across the galaxy for millennia. But now they also illuminated a path toward a future that honored the past while embracing the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. 5 years had passed since Marcus first discovered the derelict Vorthak ship, and New Geneva had transformed beyond recognition. What had once been a modest frontier colony was now a thriving center of interspecies cooperation, home to humans, Centauri, Corvin, and dozens of other species who had come to study and work alongside Kethvar. The colony's reputation had spread throughout the galaxy, but not in ways that Marcus had expected. Rather than becoming famous for its advanced technology or scientific breakthroughs, New Geneva had become known for something far more valuable. It was a place where trust between species was not just possible, but actively cultivated. "We have created something unprecedented," Kethvar observed as they stood on the observation deck of the new research facility, looking down at the bustling streets where beings from dozens of worlds worked side by side, a community where species differences are seen as strengths rather than barriers. The transformation had not been without challenges. The early days had been marked by misunderstandings, cultural conflicts, and the inevitable difficulties that arose when beings with radically different biologies and worldviews tried to live and work together. But each crisis had been resolved through patient dialogue and mutual respect, establishing precedents that made future cooperation easier. Marcus had found his role as the colony's integration coordinator both rewarding and exhausting. His job was to help new species settle into the community, mediating between different cultural expectations and finding practical solutions to problems that ranged from dietary requirements to atmospheric preferences. "We have another request," Dr. Tip Chen told him during their weekly briefing. A group of refugee hegemony scientists. Their homeworld was destroyed in a stellar collapse, and they're looking for a place to continue their research. The hegemony were a proud species, known for their advanced physics but also for their tendency toward racial superiority. Integrating them into New Geneva's cooperative culture would be a significant challenge. "What's their specialization?" Marcus asked. "Temporal mechanics." They were working on some kind of time dilation research when their star went supernova. Marcus exchanged a look with Kethvar, who had been listening from his position near the window. Temporal mechanics was one area where even Vorthak knowledge was limited. "It could be beneficial," Kethvar said thoughtfully. "My people encountered time dilation effects during our deep space explorations, but we never fully understood the underlying principles. These refugees might help us comprehend something that has puzzled me for centuries." Dedicated. The decision to accept the hegemony refugees proved to be one of the most important in New Geneva's history. The scientists arrived bitter and traumatized, having lost everything they had ever known. Their initial interactions with the colonists were marked by suspicion and barely concealed contempt for what they saw as primitive species. But Kethvar's approach to welcoming them was masterful. Rather than confronting their prejudices directly, he simply shared his own story. How he had survived the destruction of his entire civilization, how he had found purpose and healing through the kindness of beings he had initially underestimated. "Loss is universal," he told the hegemony scientists during their first community meeting. "So is the capacity for renewal. You have lost your world, but you still possess your knowledge and your ability to contribute to something larger than yourselves." The breakthrough came 6 months later, when the hegemony scientists' temporal research, combined with Kethvar's understanding of harmony drives, produced something extraordinary, a method for faster-than-light communication that could transmit messages instantly across galactic distances. The implications were staggering. For the first time in galactic history, different star systems could coordinate their activities in real time. The technology could revolutionize trade, diplomacy, and emergency response across the entire galaxy. But the discovery also brought unwanted attention to New Geneva. Representatives from major galactic powers arrived daily, all seeking to acquire or control the new communication technology. Some came with offers of vast wealth, others with barely concealed threats. They see only the technology. Kethvar observed as they watched another delegation of Zenthari officials arrive at the colony's spaceport. They do not understand that the real innovation is not in the devices themselves, but in the cooperation that created them. Marcus found himself at the center of increasingly complex negotiations. The galaxy's major powers all wanted exclusive access to the communication technology, but the research team that had developed it represented 7 different species working together. Any agreement would need to satisfy multiple governments with conflicting interests. The solution they developed was unprecedented in galactic politics. Rather than allowing any single government to control the technology, New Geneva announced the formation of the Cooperative Research Foundation, an interspecies organization dedicated to developing and sharing technologies that benefited all civilizations equally. "We will not repeat the mistakes of the past," Kethvar declared in the Foundation's charter. "Knowledge belongs to the universe, not to those who happen to discover it first." The Foundation's first major project was the establishment of a galaxy-wide communication network using the new temporal transmission technology. But unlike previous interstellar infrastructure projects, this one was designed from the beginning to be accessible to all species, regardless of their economic or military power. The network launched 3 years after the technology's discovery, connecting thousands of star systems in an instantaneous web of communication. The effect on galactic civilization was immediate and profound. Isolated colonies could call for help in emergencies. Scientists could collaborate across vast distances. Families separated by interstellar travel could stay in touch, but perhaps most importantly, the network began to break down the barriers of misunderstanding and fear that had kept different species isolated from each other for millennia. "We are witnessing the birth of a true galactic community," Kethvar told Marcus as they monitored the network's first months of operation. "My people dreamed of such connectivity, but they could never have imagined the scale we have achieved." The success of the communication network led to other collaborative projects. New Geneva became the headquarters for research initiatives that tackled some of the galaxy's most pressing problems: environmental restoration, disease control, and conflict resolution between species. Each project followed the same basic principle that had guided the colony from the beginning. All participants were treated as equals, regardless of their species' relative power or technological advancement. The results consistently exceeded expectations, as different perspectives and approaches combined to produce innovative solutions. Marcus often reflected on how far they had come from that first desperate rescue mission. The paralyzed alien he had found aboard a derelict ship had become the galaxy's most influential advocate for interspecies cooperation. The failing cargo hauler had become the coordinator of projects that spanned hundreds of star systems. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not found my ship?" Kethvar asked during one of their regular evening conversations. "All the time," Marcus admitted. "I think about all the things that could have gone wrong, all the decisions that brought us to this point." "I have a different perspective," Kethvar said. "I believe our meeting was inevitable. The universe has a tendency toward cooperation when conditions are right. We simply provided those conditions." As New Geneva's reputation continued to grow, it began attracting visitors from the most remote corners of the galaxy. Scientists, philosophers, artists, and refugees all came seeking the same thing, a place where they could be valued for who they were rather than what species they belonged to. One particular group of visitors changed everything yet again. They arrived without fanfare, a small delegation from a species that most of the galaxy had never heard of, the Architects, an ancient race that had been observing younger civilizations from the shadows for millions of years. "They are older than even my people were," Kethvar said after their first meeting with the Architect delegation. "They have watched the rise and fall of countless civilizations. and they have come here because they see something unique. The architect's message was both humbling and inspiring. They had been monitoring galactic civilization for eons, waiting for the emergence of a truly cooperative interspecies culture. Most civilizations, they explained, eventually destroyed themselves through competition and conflict. But a very few, learned to transcend their individual limitations through genuine collaboration. New Geneva represents the first successful example of what we call a synthesis culture, the lead architect explained through their crystalline communication device, a civilization that grows stronger through diversity rather than weaker through conflict. The architect's endorsement brought delegations from across the galaxy, all seeking to understand and replicate New Geneva's success. Marcus found himself giving presentations to beings from species he had never heard of, explaining the principles that had guided their community's development. The key, he always emphasized, not the blind faith that ignored differences, but the deliberate choice to believe that other beings shared fundamental values of compassion and cooperation. Trust must be earned, he would tell his audiences, but it must also be offered. Someone has to take the first step, has to risk disappointment in order to create the possibility of connection. As New Geneva approached its 10th anniversary as an interspecies community, Marcus and Kethvar found themselves planning something that would have been unthinkable when they first met, a galaxy-wide conference on cooperative civilization, bringing together representatives from every known intelligent species. "We will need to be careful," Kethvar warned as they reviewed the preliminary agenda. "Many of these species have been enemies for centuries. Simply getting them to sit in the same room will be an achievement." The conference was scheduled to last for one standard month, with sessions on everything from trade policy to cultural exchange. But the real purpose was simpler: to demonstrate that cooperation between species was not just possible but profitable for everyone involved. The opening ceremony took place in New Geneva's main amphitheater, a structure designed to accommodate the atmospheric and gravitational needs of dozens of different species. Marcus looked out over the assembled delegates, beings whose ancestors had fought wars spanning millennia, now gathered to discuss their shared future. 700 years ago, I watched my people die because they could not cooperate with others to face a common threat, Kethvar said in his opening address. Today, we have the opportunity to ensure that such tragedies never happen again. The conference exceeded everyone's expectations. Preliminary agreements were reached on trade standardization, conflict resolution procedures, and emergency response protocols. More importantly, personal relationships were formed between delegates who had previously seen each other only as potential enemies. But the conference's most significant outcome was the formal establishment of the Galactic Cooperation Council, an interspecies organization dedicated to promoting peaceful collaboration throughout the galaxy. New Geneva was chosen as its permanent headquarters, and Kethvar was elected as its first director of cultural exchange. "We have come so far," Kethvar mused as they watched the last of the conference delegates depart. "From two beings alone in the void to the leaders of a movement that spans the galaxy." Marcus nodded, but his thoughts were already turning to the future. The Galactic Cooperation Council was just the beginning. There were thousands of species that had not yet joined the cooperative movement, civilizations that still saw the universe as a place of competition rather than collaboration. "What's next?" he asked. "Now we prove that our model can work on the largest scale possible," Kethvar replied. "We show the galaxy that cooperation is not just an idealistic dream, but a practical necessity for survival." As they planned for the challenges ahead, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. It had begun with a simple decision: to help someone in need, regardless of the cost or complexity. That single act of compassion had cascaded into changes that affected billions of beings across hundreds of star systems. "You once told me that every act of kindness creates possibilities that never existed before," Kethvar said, echoing Marcus's thoughts. "We have created more possibilities than either of us could have imagined." Looking up at the stars, visible through the amphitheater's transparent dome, Marcus thought about all the civilizations out there, some just beginning their journey into space, others ancient beyond measure, all facing the fundamental choice between cooperation and conflict. New Geneva had proven that cooperation was possible. The Galactic Cooperation Council would prove that it was sustainable. And somewhere among those distant stars, other beings would continue the work they had started, building bridges between species and creating possibilities that had never existed before. The galaxy was vast, and the work was far from complete. But for the first time in galactic history, there was hope that all of its diverse civilizations might someday learn to trust each other, to see their differences as strengths rather than threats, and to build a future worthy of the infinite possibilities that surrounded them. In the end, it had all begun with one human's refusal to abandon someone in need. As Marcus and Kethvar prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, they carried with them the simple truth that had guided their journey from the beginning. In a universe full of wonders, the greatest miracle of all was the capacity of different beings to care for each other across the vast distances between stars. A human mechanic rescued a paralyzed alien wolf from a crippled ancient starship.